This podcast is a member of WGPRN, WildGamesProductions.com.
Hello, folks, and welcome to episode number 5 of the Darker Days podcast. It is I, your host Vincent, along with my faithful co-host Mark. Mark, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Vincent. How you doing?
Great. As a special edition today, we have a special guest, Rob. Rob, say hello.
Hello.
How you doing today, Rob?
I'm surviving. It's a 3-day weekend ahead of me, so it's getting better.
That's right. It's 4th of July weekend here in the States.
Oh, God, it is. Congratulations, guys.
Independence from, oh, never mind. Well, this, obviously, we renumbered the episodes, because someone had, made a little comment that it might be a little confusing because of episode 0.
I'm completely confused. I don't know where we are.
We're episode 5. This is actually a milestone for podcasting. Apparently, in the podcast world, if you get to episode 5, that means you'll be around longer than 4 episodes.
Something to be proud of.
Yeah, definitely.
There are a lot of podcasting networks out there that don't take you if you don't have at least 5 episodes. So, yeah, it's important, I guess.
Yeah, it is, definitely. Now, Rob, want to explain a little bit about, you host your own weekly, or I should say daily podcast, I think it is?
No, it's weekly. If we did daily, I'd be insane.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It's called the Bear Swarm Podcast. We record out of the back room of a gaming shop down here in Springfield, Missouri. Essentially, it's a bunch of friends sitting around microphones talking about whatever we're interested in, and every week we try to talk about gaming. We start the show off with usually a topic discussion of something in role-playing, and then we move into just BSing about our, stuff we've discovered that week or personal stuff, just whatever we feel like talking about.
Mm-hmm. And generally, what is it, a 10, 15-minute podcast? Or
we're typically around an hour. We've hit hour and a half sometimes, but I try to keep them around an hour-ish. But if we really get going on stuff, we just keep going.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Well, we brought you along this week because you actually got a jump start since you had gotten the Geist Quick Start rules, which a lot of us had not gotten. And we want to hear your take on it, as opposed to our take. So we'll get to that when we get to the New World of Darkness feature. Mark, you want to jump into the mailbag and pull out our letters and see what's going on?
Yeah, reaching right in. Well, there's been a lot of activity over to our forums, so I want to say a big thanks to everybody who's posting there, building up a cool little community. There are plenty of places to go on the web and discuss World of Darkness games, so yeah, we think it's really neat that people are taking the time to drop by our forums and share their thoughts there. So thanks, guys. Keep them coming. The emails have been coming in thick and fast. Big shout out to Beckett. He sent us a mail with some interesting insights into Monty Cook's World of Darkness. And if folks are actually interested in that, there was a variant set of rules. Maybe we could take a closer look at that with Beckett's help somewhere down the line. Bogan Knight sent us a fantastic mail. The man is clearly a World of Darkness scholar of distinction. He's got lots of experience with Vampire the Eternal Struggle, the Rage card game, live-action role-playing with the Camarilla, and World of Darkness games across all the main game lines. So we'd love to get him on the show at some point to share some of his war stories with our listeners. Also a shout out to Rosie, who's been checking us out while playing World of Warcraft. Excellent use of your time there, Rosie. She's going to be starting a game up soon with 5 players, so be sure to drop us a line, let us know how that goes. We also haven't heard from our main man Telperion in a while. Drop us a line, dude, say hi. And finally, shouts out to Warlock 2000 and William Powell, along with Beckett and Bogan Knight. They're our most recent members of the forums, and they're already diving right in there. So good stuff, guys. Thanks a lot.
And, of course, you can drop a line to Mark anytime because he's always refreshing that finger at darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. I almost forgot the email address. Wow.
darkerdaysradio@gmail.com, indeed.
And you can check us out at wildgamesproductions.com/forums, and you can sign up and drop us a little note. Good stuff. And that's pretty much ending the mailbag today, wouldn't you say?
Yep, rooting around at the bottom here and nothing else down there.
Have you had any experiences in LARPing, Mark?
Very small amount. We did a couple of impromptu vampire LARPs, and I've helped my cousin out. He was involved in making props for fantasy LARPs, so I helped a little bit out on that side at a couple of conventions, but no real experience, no. It sounds like fun, but I've just not had the time or inclination to give it a real shot.
I know I personally had been in a werewolf file LARP. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I was playing in it, and I did wind up dying, but...
Oh, excellent.
Rob, you played in any LARPs?
I've never played in any LARPs. I've attended a few different LARPs and watched other people play. It's just not my cup of tea. There's just no appeal in it for me.
Too many rubber swords.
Too many rock, paper, scissor going on.
I've tended to notice people tend to take themselves a little too seriously, and it's my first priority in gaming is to have as much fun as possible. And the few LARPs I've seen and I've attended, and it might just be, bad luck on my end, but it's these people really get into it and really take this seriously, and when you start laughing, they get upset with you.
Oh dear.
Sometimes you just can't help but laugh at some of those people's faces. Just,
there will be no fun here, dear oh dear.
All right, on to some White Wolf news itself. Looks like they have some ready-made mage characters for download, which you can plug and play into your campaign, which is something that Mark and I always preach about. Anything you can just pick up and throw right in your campaign is always good to be embraced by us and the community. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
That's great. That's one of my biggest things with less time on my hands. If I can pick it up and get going with it right away, that's a definite sale for me. So, yeah, worth checking out.
And there's obviously, so there were some more Geist previews floating in and out, but we'll get to that a little bit later in the show in our New World of Darkness section. And now, let's go to the part that everybody cannot wait for. Spooky News with Mark.
Okay, spooky news this week is about suicide machines. These, simply put, are machines that you can make or buy that automate the process of committing suicide. Some of them help you shoot yourself in the face, others administer lethal injections, others help you gas yourself. They're used by people who want an infallible, error-free way of ending their lives for whatever reason. Unpleasant stuff, and without getting into the discussions of the ethics and morality of suicide and voluntary euthanasia, the very idea of a self-operated machine to help you step off the carousel is, I think, inherently creepy. And as we'll see, there's a number of interesting ramifications for World of Darkness games. Now, strange as these things sound, they exist in the real world. One of the most famous is the Perfusor, which was promoted just last year by Roger Kusch, who was once a conservative politician over in Germany. It sets up an injection. The user injects himself with a needle, pushes a button on the machine, and the machine shoots down an injection of potassium chloride, which is the same as used in lethal injections in the United States. It's supposed to kill the subject in seconds, but this is not always the case. Another hit the news last year was made by an elderly guy from Australia from designs that he apparently got off the internet. Complex design using a bus or a remote control for a toy car and a pistol. He used it to fire multiple shots from a .22 semi-automatic pistol at his own head, rather than be moved into a care home by his relatives. We also have the case of Dr. Philip Nitschke, who is also from Australia, who in last year, 2008, designed a system of suicide by anoxia caused by the inhalation of nitrogen. Basically, this machine replaces your normal air intake with nitrogen. Your body thinks it's breathing normally, and of course it's not. Bypasses the body's natural urge to struggle against suffocation. Prior to that, in 2003, the same doctor designed a machine that would allow the user to inhale carbon monoxide, which he later replaced with nitrogen because it provides an easier passage out of this world, apparently. And back in '96, the same Dr. Nitschke developed an earlier system called the Deliverance Machine that allowed the user to administer a lethal injection through a laptop. The machine was hooked up to the laptop, you got the program running, and it just popped up Windows-style prompts on the screen. Hit the space key if you want to continue. Another one, yes, you've confirmed to continue with this. If you hit it a third time, you will be killed by lethal injection. This one was used in at least 4 cases of suicide. And of course, there's good old Jack Kevorkian and his wonderfully named Thanatron and Mercitron machines. The first, the Thanatron administered a mixture of chemicals, much like the cocktail used in the lethal injections, which put the user to sleep before killing him. And the second one administered carbon monoxide through a face mask. So there you go, a grim picture from the real world there. So how do you use this in a World of Darkness game? Well, we've got the Geist preview coming up later on, and Geist is a game about those who have been beyond the veil of death and returned changed. So you could use one of these, for example, as the kickoff for your Geist character. Your character uses one of these Thanatron machines, a suicide machine, and it goes wrong. They don't die. Not fully anyway. Come back as one of the Sin Eaters. If you're playing Old World of Darkness, you could use it in Wraith. We used these in a Wraith game a few years ago. From the other side of the Shroud, the Wraiths know that one of these things is about to be used. They can perhaps see the death marks beginning to manifest on the person who's going to be using the machine. And the player characters are then sent to reap the wraith of the user, the suicide victim, or to prevent others from reaping him first. So you have these people in the living world about to take their own lives, unaware that there's a whole cluster of wraiths just waiting for them on the other side of the Shroud. If you're a mage player, these things could be used to enter the lands of the dead for whatever reason, a way to compel awakening by some kind of artificial near-death experience under controlled conditions. And the Old World of Darkness mage, the Ascension, of course, this is of most interest to the Euthanatos tradition. One of their initiatory rites involves a trip into the Shadowlands, the Agama Sojourn, and this might be a way for a technologically minded Euthanatos character to send himself across the Shroud and bring himself back again under controlled conditions. I think one of the most creepy and interesting uses would be for a vampire game. You put something more than just potassium chloride in the machine, a cocktail of lethal chemicals and vampire blood, and you have a machine that will create a vampire by embracing them by proxy. You might want to ask, why might these be used? Clans like the Giovanni or Cappadocians from the Old World of Darkness could have an interest in them, given their affiliation with necromancy and the dead. We're going to talk about the Sabbat in a little while. It could be used as part of the Sabbat creation rites. So there you have the creepiness of the suicide machines. Grim and unpleasant subject, to be sure, no doubt about it. But in the World of Darkness, the creepier the better.
Oh, definitely. I could see this in the making of some type of like horror movie. Some kids stumble upon something and become vampires or something like that. I could see that happening.
There was another thing that popped into my mind with New Vampire. There's a bloodline out of one of the books. I believe they're the children of Judas, who is before they're embraced, they're suicide victims that a vampire then goes into embrace. And I could see them using one of these machines as kind of a setup for the next embrace.
Right. Well, Judas hanged himself, of course. So yeah, that's a nice tie-in there.
Good call. Yeah. Well, this has been some interesting, spooky news you found this week, Mark.
Yeah, it left me with a really, really creepy feeling. I'm going to have to take a long shower after the show, I think, now. But, yeah.
Of course, if you want to use this in your campaign, drop by the forums and let us know how it works out in your campaign. We always love to hear your feedback on everything that we do. Mark is hitting refresh right now, waiting for that first email. Oh, wait, we're still recording. Never mind. Anyway, let's go on to our first feature tonight. In the original or classic World of Darkness, the Sabbat. This is going to be the part one of 2 parts, I think. Mark, what do you say?
Yeah, we'll split it over this show and the next. Cover the basics on this show and then get into some of the detailed sub-factions in the Sabbat next show.
Well, basically, the Sabbat, we can basically say about them, they were initially antagonists. They weren't meant for players to actually use them to begin with. They were just meant to be thrown in there to, antagonize the players pretty much. And they were pretty much feral bikers from hell. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yeah.
And they were fleshed out a little bit more in a couple more books, like The Player's Guide to the Sabbat, The Storyteller's Handbook to the Sabbat, and The Dirty Secrets of the Black Hand.
The infamous, yeah.
Which actually, didn't they revise it into another guide to the Sabbat later on? I believe so.
Yeah, they use similar titles later on. Under the revised game, it got its own hardcover, just called Guide to the Sabbat, with a companion book called Cain's Chosen, The Black Hand.
Ooh, the Black Hand.
The revised handbook, Guide to the Sabbat, is, in my mind, one of the finer books that came out of the revised Vampire line. Very good stuff.
Rob, what can you say about the Sabbat?
I've got to say that it's been years since I played anything in the Old World of Darkness, so My memories of the Sabbat and old vampire games is fuzzy, to say the least.
Well, what we want to do here with this feature is to just look at certain elements of the sect with the principal focus of making them easy to incorporate into your chronicle, to make them memorable, to make them different, and show how to portray them as something that steps away from that stereotype of biker vampires from hell.
Hey, they're cool.
Yeah, well, or chainsaw-wielding pro wrestling vampires. That's good
Hey,
too.
leave Wolfman Jack alone.
I've got a lot of respect for the Wolfman. You know it.
So basically, the Sabbat have embraced their non-human sides and they're rejecting humanity pretty much, as far as I remember, Mark.
Yeah, they've got no interest in pretending to be something they're not. They have a non-human spirituality and non-human beliefs. They've developed alternate methods of living, alternate codes of morality by which to govern their lives and understand their state as one of the undead. And they contrast primarily with the Camarilla, who were the core standard vampires of the old World of Darkness Vampire the Masquerade game, who still try to preserve their humanity in one degree or another. The actual stat humanity measured how far away from a humanistic state the vampire has degraded. The Sabbat rejected this completely. And in play, it's one of the things that really needs to be emphasized in order to bring them out and give them the color and flavor that they deserve. They do not adhere to human codes of morality or behavior. It's not the same as being a ravening beast. It's much harder to play than that. Their thought patterns are alien to us. Their ethics are inhuman. They're removed from humanity and their ways. They're also warlike. They're combative, but they're not so much at war with all other vampires or mortals or the rest of the world. They're at war with their elders. The Sabbat were born out of revolts against the ruling vampire classes, and under Sabbat belief, they're at war with the Methuselahs and their masters, the Antediluvians. Now, the Sabbat believe that they're real, the Antediluvians. They believe that they will rise one night and eat the world, and their war is to survive until that night comes. And then, well, all bets are off.
Yeah, they come across as creepy, strange, jarring, and alien-like compared to the Camarilla, pretty much. And they have a couple paths of enlightenment we're going to go over here right now, and put some emphasis on these so you can help flesh out your character a little. The first one, Mark, why don't you explain that one a little bit?
Well, yeah, the passive enlightenment, placing strong emphasis on these, I think, is the best way to bring across the non-human aspect of their spirituality. It's easy to say, they're alien or they're strange or they're inhuman, but how are you going to show that in play? These passive enlightenment, they are what replaces humanity. So a Sabbat vampire doesn't cling to humanity, he clings to the path of Cain, the path of evil revelations, the path of honorable accord. Now, out of these, a handful of them are deeply esoteric, very spiritual in nature. The path of Cain, the path of Lilith, the path of the Cathari, the path of death and the soul. So if you want to portray a Sabbat vampire with a deeply mystical nature who pursues ancient secrets, lost spirituality and that kind of thing, these are the ones that you want to use for that kind of character. The first two, the paths of Cain and the path of Lilith in particular, they tie in well to the primordial histories and beliefs of the vampires, and they're very good for players or NPCs who are interested in plumbing the mysteries of the Antediluvians.
And then the path of evil revelations, this is pretty much the stereotype for the Sabbat. This is like the deceptors, the manipulators, the corrupt politicians, and the sinister masterminds, like Lex Luthor. Oh, sorry, go ahead. And that was for that one.
Yeah, it's the path of evil revelations is the infernalist path, and that's the reputation that Sabbat had as antagonists. These are demon worshipping vampires, and the path of evil revelations is the one for that. They also have this. Well, we've mentioned the stereotypical vampire biker from hell, and if you're looking to portray that, the path of the feral heart gives you a good handle on that attitude, that belief system. It's a classic bestial approach to vampirism. It has an almost animal spirituality at its heart. So you might want to use this path if you want to portray primal predators and monsters in the classic sense. Now, by contrast to that, you have the path of honorable accord. This is noble, almost virtuous. Which it's hard to imagine a Sabbat vampire being virtuous, but it has aspects of chivalry to it. It's honorable in the way of the honor of the warrior, and it's ideal for characters who want to have the life of the warrior and live that life without descending into bestial rages and gnawing on their katanas. It's good for those classic loner types with their strict codes of honor.
And then we go
That
to
path
the...
always-
Oh, go ahead, Rob, sorry.
That path always really reminded me of Dracula from the old Dracula movies, where he wasn't human by any stretch of the imagination, didn't try to blend in, but wasn't a savage, raging, mad beast of a vampire.
Very much a lord of his domain, with his own code of belief. Totally.
Master of his own domain, right. And then we go into the path of power and inner voice. You familiar with this one, Mark? Well, anyway, if you're not, it's very close to the Evil Revelations, and that it accentuates control and manipulation of those around you by controlling yourself first. Be in total control of herself. Sound familiar?
Indeed. Yeah.
It works well for the would-be leaders in the group. That's pretty much I could say
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, if you want to have a mastermind or a manipulator who's not evil at heart, then this path is ideal. The sinister politician who may not be corrupt, but nevertheless is looking to pull the strings of those around him.
And there's also plenty of roads of enlightenment, or paths, I should say. If you check out the Dark Ages Vampire, there's quite a few of them in there you can grab and probably convert over to your game quite easily, because anything can convert over from Dark Ages. This is what I think.
Yeah, in Dark Ages they're known as roads, and in fact some of them have supplemental splat books just totally fleshing out those. The Road of Sin, the Road of the Beast, the Road of Kings. So you could go to a Vampire Dark Ages supplement and draw inspiration from those, and even transplant the roads into the modern day paths without too much trouble. Now, in addition to the paths of enlightenment, another thing that really sets the Sabbat vampires apart from their Camarilla counterparts are the idea of the ritai, numerous rites and rituals that the Sabbat use. It's another powerful way of portraying the Sabbat. The guide to the Sabbat, the hardcover, lists plenty of these. I mean, pages and pages of the things, down from the small little daily rituals that come at the rising of the moon to enormous grand blood feasts that the local bishop might hold. Check them out, and you should make sure that they're central to any Sabbat game, whether you're running it for player characters or whether you're portraying NPCs. There's two in particular that I think should receive special attention. The creation rites, which I mentioned just a moment ago, and the Voldery. Vince, maybe you want to talk a bit about the creation rites here.
They mostly differ from clan to clan. It was emphasized more on the revised hardcore book. One of the versions has newly embraced vampires buried alive. Well,
Yeah.
undead.
Yeah.
And they're forced to dig their way to freedom. How about that? What would you think about that? I mean, that's got to be crazy to do that. Imagine putting that in one of your one of your stories, and having your players start from there.
Great way to start. Yeah, it really sets the tone.
And then, of course, those who failed or left to rot in earth, and pretty much that's their doom. Whatever creation rate you use, you start with something as powerful as this. That's pretty much all I can think about for that offhand, Mark. Would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, what's good about those is it, like I said, sets the tone for the game where you start off effectively as a would-be corpse, and you have to dig your way out and show that you're powerful and strong enough to take this new unlife by the throat. And it helps set the Sabbat apart from the I look good in velvet brigade. It's a a literal rebirth into a new existence and removal from humanity into a new state.
That could be good for our sub-storylines. Yeah, definitely. I could think about throwing that into my campaign. Go ahead.
The other one that we mentioned a moment ago, the Voldery. This is the ritual of sharing blood between pack members, making each member blood bonded to the rest in varying degrees. More than that, though, it lies at the heart of the Sabbat sect. It binds the Sabbat together in belief, in purpose, in spirit. The Voldery ritual is presided over by the pack priest. And quite simply, each member of the pack drains a bit of blood into a chalice, which is then passed around, and they all drink from it. So as you can imagine, it would be a great tool to use at the gaming table. If you're that kind of gamer, You could even use a prop, such as a nice gothic chalice to hand around, or hollowed-out skull, or something similar. Of course, you should only mind the sharing and the drinking of the blood. We don't want to condone any ritual bloodletting here on Darker Days.
Of course not. We don't condone anything here like that at all. And they mostly travel. They mostly are considered packs, right, Mark? And the pack is the central structure of the Sabbat.
Yeah, it's more binding than the coteries of the Camarilla. They're not held together by convenience or politics or circumstance. They're held together by blood. By the Voldery, by belief. And Sabbat games should really emphasize this. They're not lone wolves. They live and function as a group. They're powerfully loyal and committed to one another. And it's a great analog for the gaming group itself. So needless to say, the playing group should probably be the pack, or based very closely around it. Maybe you want one player to be the pact priest, another to be the Doctus, the leader of the pack, or maybe you want to save that role for an NPC.
I would think making that an NPC would be a little bit more fair. I just, every time I have a group and I say, all right, you're the leader, or they designate one, that just leads to so many fights and people being annoyed and backstabbing and little notes written around. I stay away from that.
Totally. Yeah. Well, we were once going to play a Star Trek game, and it derailed in the intro session when we couldn't agree who got to be the captain. It goes nowhere.
Oh my God, I'm Captain Kirk.
The way we started dealing with that in our group is that we don't have necessarily a leader, but we have somebody who's our face, who will present themselves as our leader to the group, where everybody still makes decisions as a group, but there's this one guy who's kind of our figurehead.
Like the public relations person.
Exactly.
That's a good idea. That's good.
That's actually a really good idea. That way no one could be actually the leader and they'll be fighting. Good call, Rob. Good call.
You could build a session around the death of the leader, for example, and then if your players are responsible enough or mature enough, see how they come to the decision of electing their own leader. Or build a session around the destruction of one or more packs and have the characters be the survivors of these destroyed packs, and they're now forced to make a new pack. Either way, the pack is an ever-present part of the Sabbat, and needs to be fairly central to the Chronicle.
We have some ideas here to help spark your memory from movies. I mean, you can go out there and rent them. A couple that we have are Near Dark. I don't know if you've seen that. I actually have personally not seen that movie. So, Mark, I'm going to let you handle that one.
It's an old classic. It's a low-budget vampire movie. Classic pack of vampires roaming about the place in a mobile home with all the windows blacked out, so they're active during the daytime, but keeping a low profile. What's good about Near Dark is you can use it for inspiration in developing loyalties between vampires of different backgrounds. They have... There's a guy who fought in the Civil War. There's a woman he's picked up in recent years. There's a kid who's been embraced as a vampire. There's a farm boy who gets plucked off his farm, and he's the protagonist of the film. So you have an interesting blend of characters there. But the way the film deals with their loyalties between each other, or the lack thereof, is something that could be plugged right into a Sabbat game. It also shows how different they see themselves from humanity, and it also is a great depiction of the gritty lives of a nomadic pack. So it's one worth checking out.
I've seen it. It's absolutely fantastic. The one thing that really resonated with me was how you can watch it for a vampire movie and see how these people have no morality left. They have no consequences for their action. They're just vampires to the core now. And in parts of the movie, it's almost an alien feeling. You just don't understand why they would do the things they do. But then you remind yourself that they're vampires. They're not human.
Yeah, it catches, for the Sabbat, it really does capture that idea of the humanity stat does not exist for these people. They have their own way of doing things. Yeah, definitely.
And then we have our next movie idea is 30 Days of Night, which I'm sure just about anyone who's anyone in World of Darkness has probably seen this movie or at least read the graphic novels.
Oh, fantastic.
I have seen this movie many times. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the graphic novels. If you want your Sabbat to be monstrous, look no further. This is your movie. Brutal, inhuman, utterly removed from the velvet-clad vampires that you see that strut around puffing their hair up. Did you enjoy that movie, Mark?
I liked it. Yeah, my girlfriend's a big vampire and zombie fan, so she got the graphic novels, and then we got the movie as well. Again, what I liked about it is just the monstrous nature of these creatures. They don't, they really don't attempt to look good or sexy or seductive. They're really freaking scary, and the way that's brought across in the film really hit the button on the head for me. That's good.
Rob?
Yeah, I actually picked up the graphic novels when they were coming out issue by issue.
Oh, cool.
And then years later, I went and saw the movie when it debuted in theaters. And about halfway through the movie, I remembered how the comics ended, so I was a little disappointed with it. But I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was intense, almost unrelentless at parts. And even if you're not doing like a Sabbat game, it gives a good depiction of how some of the more tightly bound groups of Nosferatu might end up acting.
Oh, definitely,
yeah.
yes. Good call. And then we have Nightbreed, which I know a couple people have said that it's not that great of a movie because the studio had ruined it compared to the original story. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
They cut it to pieces. They did. They butchered it. The lost footage has since been found, and there's actually right now a bit of a struggle going on to get the footage restored. But even as it stands, it's still a great portrayal of a society of monsters struggling to live by its own rules, removed from humanity. It's not strictly about vampires. It's the Nightbreed are each one is unique, a monster. In its own right. It's based on the book Cabal by Clive Barker. It's deep in its own spirituality. The Nightbreed have their own god, for example. It's got their own codes of honor, their own laws and belief systems. And what I think it has to offer for a Sabbat game is it really shows how to build a vibrant society of monsters without making them just some kind of distorted mirror of the human world. It really sets them apart as their own species, their own creatures, basically.
Sounds like something we can work with, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I thought it was good. I liked it.
Rob, you've checked that out before?
Yeah, actually, I have. I kind of treat the book and the movie the same way I treat Starship Troopers. They're completely different from one another, but both are good for their own merits and flaws. But the thing that struck me about Nightbreed was I forget what they're called, but they have these big, like Golem-esque monsters.
The Berserkers.
Yeah, the Berserkers that they have essentially chained up, and it kind of reminded me of what the Tzimisce might do to some of their flesh creatures.
Excellent. Would you like to know more? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, we have different. There's different types of NPCs as far as non-players or the antagonists for the Sabbat. We do have a Pack Priest, which is pretty much the classic Sabbat archetype, giving sermons, guiding the pack, dispensing judgment. This would pretty much be the leader, but you most likely want to put them as a non-player, as far as I'm concerned in my group. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yeah, I agree. You can use these as NPCs, or you can use them as inspiration for Sabbat characters. As far as the pack leaders or the pack priests go, certainly initially they're the kind of thing that you want to restrict to the storyteller side of the screen. Another point of inspiration, you could have a character who is a heretic to their path, a vampire who has trouble following his path. Maybe he still has a mortal family and can't leave them behind. Maybe he's suffered a crisis of faith. He struggles to cover up his lack of belief for fear that he'll be kicked out of the sect or even killed. In a similar vein, you could have a character who is a failed initiate, someone who failed to make it through his creation rites. If you go with the buried alive or buried undead and forced to dig your way to freedom, this could be someone who wasn't able to get out of the ground and was just left there. Could have been buried for years. That then maybe dug up later by accident during one of those rezonings that empties out cemeteries and rehouses the bodies somewhere else. And in amongst all the bodies, there's this withered ancient vampire who's been stuck down there. So now he's up and about, but he has to hide this fact from other vampires. And you can get plot twists in there, such as what happens when he runs across those who put him in the ground in the first place, and remember who he is.
That's a good. That could be good for like a solo story.
Yeah.
If it's maybe your players haven't gotten together and just you and another player, maybe you can run this, see what happens.
Yeah, make a good one shot.
Yeah. And then we got the Camarilla Spy. Wow, that was a tongue twister for me for some reason.
Camarilla Spy.
Basically someone that's infiltrated. I cannot speak today. What's going on?
You need to get a beer.
Ooh, beer. Anyway, this is not the beer podcast. This is the World of Darkness podcast. Anyway, yes, to pretty much he'll share in the rituals and the rites of the Camarilla, and maybe he'll start to change his beliefs and decide maybe the Sabbat really isn't for him after all.
Another one that would work well is as a solo game or a one-shot, exactly. Yeah, that would be nice. And finally, you could try using someone who is an earnest adherent of the Sabbat, someone who is probably young, recently embraced, and enthusiastically follows all of the sect's beliefs and their dictates. They're inflexible. They're unshakable. They will rat you out to the pack priest at the slightest provocation. Interesting enough as it goes, but this kind of character really comes into their own when something happens to shake or break their beliefs, and they end up going completely postal with a katana and a motorbike.
Or a chainsaw. Oh, sorry.
A chainsaw, yeah.
All right, we'll end that for part one this week, and we'll move on to the current World of Darkness, or the new World of Darkness. Basically, what we'll do is we're going to make a covenant for you, and pretty much we're going to go stick with the Sabbat this week, right, Mark? And we're going to show you how to actually make this into a bloodline into Vampire the Requiem.
Yeah, so maybe you know the Sabbat from the old World of Darkness, but you're a Requiem player now, or you play Requiem, but you don't know much about the Sabbat. You're interested in having another covenant for use in the game. So that's what we're going to do here. Just take you step by step through turning the Sabbat into a new World of Darkness Vampire the Requiem covenant.
Right, so basically you're just going to grab your pad and you're going to write down some notes from the original books if you have them, or if you have the PDF. So you're going to jot down an overview of the Covenant, what your general thoughts on it is, get a description of it, what its members are, and its general philosophy, get some bits on the rituals, and then flesh out the titles and the duties of each of them.
Right, those was it 4 or 5 sections? They're presented in a standard way in the Vampire the Requiem book. Overview, members, philosophy, rituals, and titles and duties 5. So, you can get a strong handle on what these sections would look like just from reading the excellent Old World of Darkness book Guide to the Sabbat. So, go and do that.
Yeah,
and
definitely
in the meantime,
have that handy.
We'll call out for you just a few nuggets for each section to get you going. So as an overview, as far as Vampire the Requiem goes, the Sabbat is a covenant comprised of vampires who embrace their inhuman nature and strive for freedom from the oppression of their elders. They have a strongly spiritual nature. They adhere to a variety of belief systems. They govern themselves with codified rites and rituals. And they have no compunctions about making bloody war on those who oppose them. In essence, they are spiritual warriors seeking the path to enlightenment.
They're basically chosen for their strength of heart, their inner resilience, and their likelihood they'll be able to shed their mortal lives and live as something removed from nature. As far as main clans are concerned, Mark, I was thinking maybe the Gangrel. Who else?
And the Mekhet, yeah. The Gangrel and the Mekhet, I would say, would be classic members of the Sabbat.
The Ventrue probably will be thrown in there, and I think that's about the main ones I would probably throw into there.
Yeah, the Ventrue could be drawn to the power that the sect offers through certain of its paths, but in the end, I think the clan is less important than the strength of the initiate's soul.
And we have 2 general philosophies going on for them. The first one, the ancients are real and they hunger.
Yeah, the Sabbat believe that vampires descend from a small number of powerful ancients, whom they call the Antediluvians. At the moment, the Antediluvians sleep. One day, however, they will rise and devour their descendants. And the Sabbat prepare for that final night through subgroups, such as their Inquisition and the Warriors of the Black Hand. Now, other vampires scoff at these fairy tales, but the Sabbat know the truth. Elders who do the bidding of the Antediluvians must be stopped, and if they cannot be stopped, they must be destroyed.
The second one, vampires. You are not human, not anymore. Basically, they are no longer part of nature, they are outside the laws of the world and must seek their own path. Humanity is discarded and other roads to the truth must be sought out. That could be really good for another one-shot as well. Along with you get buried in the coffin, dig your way out, and then you got to figure things out on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
They do use the same mechanics as humanity. Their requirements are different, as are their hierarchies of sin. Sabbat vampires also choose a path and follow that as a way to understand what they have become, or what they will become.
Right. So that's where the most modding would come in, I think. Vampire the Requiem still uses humanity, and so what you're going to need to do is look at the hierarchies of sin as presented in the Paths of Enlightenment in the Old World of Darkness, and just plug those right in their place. The actual mechanics of transgressing that path will stay the same, but you're going to replace each of its levels with something from the path instead of sticking with humanity. Beyond that, you have the rituals and observations. Now, we've talked about those a little bit already. The rites of creation and the Voldery are the central rites of the Sabbat. So you should make these central to the Covenant in order to properly represent the sect within the Requiem game. Alternatively, you can grab hold of the Vampire the Masquerade Guide to the Sabbat, look at the huge list of rituals in the back, and select several of those that you feel fit your game best, and plug them into Requiem.
Sounds good. And then for the rituals and observations, as we mentioned before, on the rites of creation and Voldery, I think we're on the titles and duties. I'm sorry, Mark.
You're a good man.
I was reading your show notes and I messed it up. I'll admit it. I messed up. And basically, the titles and duties have religious overtones in it. They do have a pack priest, they do have a bishop, and they do have cardinals in the inner circle. So maybe you'll have a pack that just goes through the motions and really just works on their own with a pack priest as opposed to the larger picture, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. The two ranks that you'd want to keep, I think, are probably pack priest and bishop. The bishop rules a geographical area, and the pack priest is the heart of the pack. They're the ones that'll have the most impact, the most powerful impact in most chronicles. So those are the two titles that I think, the two ranks that should be central parts of any covenant in the Requiem game. So there you have it, the bare bones of a Sabbat covenant. So go forth, fire up that Harley, and raise some hell.
Okay, and now on to a preview or a review. This is where Rob comes in. He had happened to grab the Geist Quick Start rules before anyone else out there, because he happens to record in the back of a shop, so he gets all the juicy bits.
Very handy.
So why don't you jump into it, Rob, and tell us what you think overall.
Well, I did get the Quick Start rules a little earlier than everyone else because I was going to run them at Free RPG Day. It turns out a lot of other stuff came up, and I never actually got to run the adventure in the back of the book. But since I was planning to run it, I've read over the entire thing like 3 times now, and I have a pretty good grasp of what's in the Quick Start rules. Over on my podcast, I did a little 5-minute review synopsis, kind of my personal thoughts on it. Mm-hmm. And if people are interested, they can go check that out. But I was figuring for here we could discuss it a little more than just me sitting in front of a microphone.
But we'd like to hear you, Rob. Please speak some more.
The first thing that really strikes me, though, is at my core, I loved Wraith. Wraith is probably the best thing they've put out. And one thing I was really hoping to see was the same kind of mechanic with the Shadow, where somebody else would play the Shadow. And the Quick Start rules don't have anything like that, but it's really easy to see how you could draft up a Geist that is bound to your character and pass that to another player at the table to kind of take control of that entity that makes up your character.
Well, that struck me right away. The fact that you have this ghost bound to you in some way or form, and that reminded me of the Shadow immediately. I'm also a big Wraith fan, so I was thrilled to see that come in. And there were a few other things in there as well that echoed Wraith in a number of ways. And when I was reading about Geist initially, I kind of had the impression they were going to step away from Wraith more than they actually seem to have done. So it was nice to see a lot of those old concepts still having some life in the new game.
Oh yeah, when they first announced it, I was ecstatic. I was looking forward to my new Wraith, but then somebody made the comment. One of the designers said that if we were going to do Wraith or Orpheus, we would call it Wraith or Orpheus. We're calling it Geist because it's not the same thing.
Jeez.
So that kind of killed all of my hopes for this game.
Deflated your balloon.
But once I actually got the Quick Start rule and I started looking over it, it's not Wraith, and it's not Wraith by a long shot, but there's a lot of throwbacks to Wraith, a lot of analogs you could see in some of the different ways they represent things.
Right, I thought the thresholds, for example, were interesting. An echo of how in Wraith the character's type of death marks them as belonging to a greater power. I mean, here it's the Horsemen, but I think it was it the Death Lords back in Wraith, I think they were called?
I believe so. Yeah, that seems familiar.
There's the keys, which were similar to the Arcanoi. I like the mementos specifically, and I thought they were a little more mysterious than fetters from Wraith. In Wraith, you knew what your fetter was, and you knew why it was your fetter. What I like about Geist is you might not know why you have a certain memento. That's something that, is going to be part of your character's story arc, I suppose, at some point. But I like the idea that you have some talismanic object, and the reason why you've got it may be hidden from you. I thought that was a very cool touch.
We're on the same page there. I thought mementos were absolutely fantastic. They are kind of like fetters, but they actually reminded me more of relics from Wraith. The objects that were destroyed and crossed the shroud, and
right.
Except now mementos exist on both sides, as opposed to just in the Shadowlands.
Yeah. One thing that I kind of ummed and ahed about was synergy, which I'm guessing is their morality system. And to me, it seemed a little forced. It seemed like, they've set a certain template for the New World of Darkness games, and I got the feeling, just from reading the quick start rules, of course, that they felt like, well, we've got to come up with a morality system, so let's make it this. And it felt a little shoehorned into the game. Now, I guess I'd need to see it in play, but on paper, it didn't really click for me.
It didn't strike me as odd when I first read it. It seemed like a natural progression. Once you've died and you've come back, your humanity is changed, especially if you have essentially a ghost tethered to your very soul. And I kind of look at it with the Geist is almost like a parasite that's part of your body now, and you don't want to. It gives you abilities and powers beyond what you normally had, so you don't want to shut it out, and yet you don't want it to take complete control of you. You want to find that good balance between it feeding off of you and you feeding off of it. So
okay.
I felt synergy actually worked really well.
All right. And another question that I came away with, what struck me about the World of Darkness, the New World of Darkness games so far, is they all have a very strong correlate with something from folklore or from legend or from fiction. And I find myself scratching my head a little bit to figure out what exactly is the kind of story that this game is meant to represent. What kind of films or books or TV shows or myths might be represented by Geist. Now, it seems like it's good for the classic Orpheus myth, I suppose, for games about mediums, those who are haunted, those who are touched by the other side, those who've had near-death experiences and come back. Works well, actually, for the possessed as an alternate system for those who've been possessed by spirits. But other than that, it struck me as being fairly narrow in focus, which need not necessarily be a bad thing, of course, but I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Rob.
Well, a few things actually leaped out to me right away when I was reading over it. And, being a Wraith fan, one of my old favorite supplements was The Risen. And
yes, yeah, that's true.
Geist almost feels like a type of Risen game. So it calls back to movies like The Crow for me, or books like The Prestige. Not the movie. The book based on it actually deals with a heavy spiritualism element. That's fantastic.
Okay.
But I think we don't have the full picture with the quick start rules.
Right.
Kind of
so
like
that's something that they would maybe draw more attention to in the release, the main release.
Yeah, I'm hoping, because I remember with Promethean, when it was first coming out, all I thought it was essentially Frankenstein created monsters. And once the game actually landed in my lap, I realized, okay, there's a lot more to this than just Dr. Frankenstein made a monster in his lab,
Yeah.
Yeah, the search for your humanity, pretty much.
Yeah.
That's what I took about it. I like that as a game.
Well, at first the only analog I could see to Promethean was the Frankenstein monster, but after reading the book, the old legends of golems and created monsters.
Pygmalion and that kind of thing, yeah.
Yeah. Egyptian myths about mummies returning to life, stuff like that. It filled in a lot more gaps once I actually had the book in my hands, and I think we might see that same kind of... I hope we see that same kind of thing with Geist.
What it struck me is even though I found myself struggling to come up with good analogs for it. At the same time, I was looking at it thinking, well, that makes it actually pretty original. It's not something which you can easily slap a label on and go, oh, it's about wizards. Oh, it's about werewolves. It's almost like they're starting to build their own mythology here, which I thought that was pretty good.
Now, it came with the sample adventure. Was it basically the sample adventure? Did it flow all right? Because I know a couple of the other ones in the past didn't really flow, and there were characters standing around, and what am I going to do now? What am I going to do? You had to actually lead them by the hand. How did it flow, Mark? I mean, Ralph.
I thought the flow was pretty good. The execution of it, the scenes seemed to work well from one to the other. I didn't like the basic concept. Stop a bad guy from summoning nasties from the underworld. It's a bit hackneyed, but the actual execution of it seemed to step beyond that initial slightly cliched premise, and it looked like it would work well.
Yeah, that was my complaint about the Hunter the Vigil one, the quick start. I really didn't like the quick start rules for that. It seemed like there was a lot of the characters can pretty much do this at this point, and then they have to figure this out. If they don't, you got to take them by the hand and move them along. I didn't really like that. I
also like the use of a real world serial killer in this. It ties it nicely into urban mythology, and also gave that adventure some added creepy resonance. So, overall, I thought it looked like it should work well, but I have not actually seen it in play.
It felt a little grandiose for a first adventure, but if I were to actually run it with an actual group and not just like at a one-shot night or something like that, I would probably weave it in with another campaign and kind of have the scenes and the events coming up in the quick start over a course of a few sessions instead of just one after another. Kind of give it a little more build-up,
Yeah, a better payoff in the climax at the end.
Because, you're trying to stop, the underworld gates from opening, which is, if that's your first adventure, what do you do to top that next?
Where do you go from there? Absolutely, yeah.
All right, well, I guess that pretty much wraps that up, unless you can think of anything else, Mark.
Well, there were two other things that really stood out for me. Going back to the earlier section of the quick start, when it's discussing the abilities of the Geists, their ghost sight, and a line that leapt out for me there. The trick is to not see ghosts, which I thought was just fantastic. You have this default position of you're seeing dead people, and in fact the trick is to tone that down and turn it off, to tune them out, which I thought was a really nice touch. That lends such a degree of atmosphere that you have this horrific reality that's impinging upon your senses all the time, and you really need to put in effort to tune that out. That set the tone for me very, very well.
So the ghost sight, is that like that Jennifer Love Hewitt ability from... Oh, never mind.
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Oh, you haven't seen Ghost Whisperer? Darn.
No, I haven't.
I'm glad it's not on over there. Anyway.
I would kind of think of it more like in American Werewolf in London, when he's sitting in the theater and his dead friend just shows up next to him.
Yeah.
Excellent.
You said there was a second thing, Mark?
Yeah, this thing called reverse possession. I really like that. I thought it really emphasized Twilight as an altered state rather than a destination. Like, in Wraith you had the Shadowlands, and that was somewhere you went. You go to the Shadowlands, you pack your bags and off you go. And they keep saying about Twilight is not a place; it's a layer of reality that's always there. And so you think, okay, well, great. So how do I do that in play? Well, reverse possession, I thought, was a great way of showing that as opposed to just saying it. And so that really worked well for me.
Definitely reminds me of werewolves and stepping sideways into the Umbria.
Yeah. Kind of phasing from one to the other.
Yeah.
All right.
There were a couple other things that kind of jumped out to me as either really cool or kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
You have the ability to infuse Geists with your own plasma to essentially bring them back to being human, which kind of ties a lot of the Geists back to like the ghost stories where the ghost just does the same pattern over and over and over without realizing why. And your Geist has you have the ability to step up to this Geist and feed it a little of your plasma to remind it that it was at one time human, and you get more information out of it so it doesn't just keep repeating the same mindless pattern over and over. I think there's a lot of potential. Yeah,
I mean, the whole idea of encountering a creature like that, and having to go up and interact with a creature trapped in some spiritual loop. It just creeps me out thinking about it. So that's very cool.
All right. So in closing, what would you guys rate this 1 out of 10 for Mark?
From 1 to 10, yeah, I'm gonna go for like around a 7, simply because as a usable system, there's clearly holes in there, but I don't want to drop its score too low, because it's just, at the end of the day, these are quick start rules. So it gave me a strong feel for the game, left me with questions, and left me wanting more. So yeah, I'm going to stick with it at a 7, maybe an 8 if I'm feeling generous, because at the end of the day, it's quick start. It's not the full thing.
So we'll say Mark 7, 8. Rob, how do you rate it?
Well, I'm terribly, terribly biased because this hits that race spot that I've been wanting for years now. But I'd probably say like an 8 or a 9. Wow. The quick start rules aren't perfect by any means, but they do exactly what they set out to do. They give me a good feel for what the game is. I know way more about it than I knew before I got it, and I'm far more interested in what product they're trying to sell me now. Once the game comes out, they're going to be shuffled to the side of my shelf and never looked at again. But as far as a marketing tool, it's invaluable. It did exactly what it set out to do.
Now, do we have a release date on the actual book itself?
Gen Con, isn't it? Gen Con?
Gen Con?
August 09, which would be Gen Con.
Yeah.
All right, so look for it then. Right now you can go through drivethrurpg.com, type in Geist Quick Start, download it there, and look what we're referring to. Read it over. Give us your review on that and your rating. Drop by the forums. Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry, it's up at the White Wolf site as well. I just saw that today. I had missed it there before I got it from RPG. But yeah, it's up at White Wolf now too.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I checked it today. I didn't see that. They must have
just
put it up later.
across it. Yeah.
Drop by the forums, wildgamesproductions.com/forums. Drop us a line on your review of Geist if you'd like, or any review, and we'll throw it up here on the podcast. You want to drop us an email, Mark? What's that email again? darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. And if you want to get in contact with Rob, do you have an email contact?
Yeah, if you guys want to take me to task on anything I said, go ahead and rob@bearswarm.com. Or bearswarm.com is our site. We have forums, contacts. You can get a hold of me through there, too.
And you can listen to Rob's podcast there, which he rants and raves about all the wonderful things in life and gaming.
I loved your profile pages. I had a good laugh reading those over. They're fantastic.
Those are actually something we created for a Scion game that we then ported to our podcast.
They're really good. I like that one. How'd you like to die? I like to die in my sleep, like my grandfather, not screaming like the passengers in his car.
Nice.
That's wonderful.
If you can't laugh at death, what can you laugh at, right?
Exactly.
You can laugh at that poor kid. Never mind. So for future shows, we'll be back in another couple of weeks. As we said, the holidays coming up this weekend. Actually, we might come back next week if I can arrange a special show, because I've been in contact with one of the developers at White Wolf. He has agreed to come on the show. I'm not going to say anything further than his name or anything until it's all hammered out, but just a little teaser for you.
Excellent. Well, if it's Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, I ain't going to be there because I'm taking a holiday to go catch Nine Inch Nails' farewell concerts. So we'll sort the scheduling out for that.
Well, then I guess it won't be next week. And then didn't we have some requests in the forums, Mark?
Yeah, in addition to the second part of our Sabbath feature, we've also had some requests for reviews of Summoners for Mage of the Awakening and a Second Sight for the New World of Darkness core line, so we'll get right to those. We've also had some requests from a couple of different posters for a section with advice on running World of Darkness games, covering a variety of issues, building the Chronicle, talking about adventures, etc., etc. So we'll give that a shot, and if that plays out well enough, that could become a semi-regular feature.
All right, so this has been the Darker Days podcast, episode number 5. Your host, Vince, signing off. Have a good night, guys.